A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
There was so much information to start with. So many times in crime scenes and missing persons especially, you don't really have a lot to go on when you start. You don't have a lot of information. And this one, there was just so much. I mean, we know who the last person was that was with them.
Yeah.
We even know possibly who the others were. First of all, let me tell you that the term circumstantial evidence gets a raw deal because most cases are actually made 100% out of circumstantial evidence. It's just that you have to connect the dots between them. Direct evidence is not very common. I mean, direct evidence is pretty much if you're standing there and you see it happen. But so many things are circumstantial evidence. You remember what Stormy kept saying about Khan's motto was no body, no crime?
Yep.
Wrong. There's many cases where they've convicted people of murder with no body. It's not easy. It is not easy, but it can be done.
I believe that can happen.
Yeah. So because there may not be any bodies left, does not mean that they're home free.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast. For the past 11 years, the people who murdered Molly and Colt have enjoyed their birthdays, participated at family celebrations. They've gotten married, some have had children, some may even have grandchildren. The point is their lives continue on and they mature, leaving the past in the rearview mirror. But forgetting about a murder must be really difficult, especially with all these reminders of the victims.
This week, we want to celebrate the birthdays of Molly and Colt. Colt would have been 33 on April 28th, and Molly would have been 28 years old on April 30th. What they would have been doing today.
Molly would probably have been married and had children. Maybe she would also have a career. Maybe she would have moved away or traveled.
Colt has a son who is now almost a teenager. Imagine what that boy goes through not having his father around.
The sad reality is that we will never know where Molly and Colt's potential may have led. Both were strong-willed people who had dreams, and that was taken away from them by people who just want to bury the truth.
Today, we're excited to have JODY BARTH back on the podcast. You may remember her from earlier episodes.
JODY is a 30-year veteran of law enforcement. She was the first female CSI detective in the Illinois State Police, and she rose through the ranks to become a detective division commander. She has won several awards for her work and is now a private investigator and author.
Let's hear what JODY has to say. All right, so today we have an old friend with us from the podcast. We have JODY BARTH, and if everyone's been listening to the podcast and staying updated about it, JODY has spent a lot of time with us analyzing this case and investigation. She has a world of experience, law enforcement experience, and done a lot of stuff for the Illinois State Police, and she's retired now, and she's also doing investigations on her own for other people, and she's done a lot of great work for this case. And so we wanted to have her back on because since we started again, there's been some new developments, and we've been going over old information, and she's gone over all of this information that we have. In fact, she's even went further where she's worked on phone records and done some amazing work with us, and has enlisted other people in her orbit, in the investigative orbit, who've helped us with certain things when we found information to discount it and verify it. So JODY, welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back, and you have not been far away ever.
I know. We've been talking periodically, but it's nice to have you back on and to kind of hear your perspective on some of the things that have been going on since we last spoke on the podcast. And I know you've been catching up on some of the podcasts as well. And we also want to make a point of saying this past Sunday was Colt's birthday. And then today, as we're recording this, it's Molly's birthday.
I saw that today.
Yeah. So
As far as Molly's birthday,
yeah.
I didn't see Colt's, but
yeah, I forgot their birthdays were very close.
Yeah.
it really brings it close to home when you think about that. You know, you think about what her life would be like today. She'd probably be a mom.
Yeah. She would have been 28.
Maybe not. I know. You know, it's so sad. And I would love nothing better but to solve this damn case. You know, it's just, it's incredible because for me, there was so much information to start with. So many times in crime scenes and missing persons especially, you don't really have a lot to go on. When you start, you don't have a lot of information. And this one, there was just so much. I mean, we know who the last person was that was with them.
Yeah.
We even know possibly who the others were.
Yep.
You know, that last morning. But it just amazes me that this has not been solved yet.
Yeah.
I know, it's sad.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
It is frustrating. And it's something like, I really mean that. I think about this case literally every day at some point during the day.
Yeah. And we also know that, you know, the law enforcement was involved with them prior to them disappearing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible to me. But, you know, and I get the environment. I get, you know, it's a very rural area. I understand the climate as far as the drug culture and things like that. I understand all of that, but there was just so much to go on initially.
Yeah.
I think.
But don't you, I mean, within your experience in your law enforcement career, a lot of times it's the kind of same variables. A lot of times when these types of murders happen, there are like illegal drugs involved. There are people who are felons who are involved. So it's not like, you know, your class A citizens are not habitually performing these murders. Sometimes you have the outliers where it's like a husband who just kind of loses it and kills his wife and disposes of the body. But most of these murders happen from people in those kind of environments. Am I correct?
You are correct. You are correct. This is not a unique situation. And trust me, you know, drug people can be very bad people. It's not like, oh, this is, you know, some special cartel that, you know, coming out of Colombia or something. I guess it could be, but the people involved that we know of are locals. They're there. I mean, their histories are there, their crimes are there, they're well known to people and to law enforcement. One of the unique things about this one was the relationship with Joe Russell, and that, to me, was a huge one.
Yeah.
That the fact that he did not pursue a search right away, it just blew me out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. And then we recently, I don't know if you got a chance to watch the Paramount Plus like half-hour little documentary that they did, but they actually found part of the call where Joe actually says called off the chase. Like we had thought that he had called it off on a separate cell phone, but they actually found the recording where he actually called off the chase, which I thought was really interesting.
It is very interesting.
Because we all thought, we heard everybody, we were told that's what happened by law enforcement that we spoke to. But the fact that they found it was just is clear cut that, you know, if he had done what he was supposed to do as a law enforcement officer, we wouldn't be having this podcast. We wouldn't be talking right now about this.
Right. Well, and the fact is, and I hate to beat a dead horse here, but the fact is that even if he called off the chase for safety reasons, he knew Khan. He knew where he was going. He knew where he ditched the cars because he picked up about 6 of them or 7 of them previously. Why not just go meet Khan and say, come on, kid, we're going to find that car, and where's the other 2 that were in here with you? I mean, he knew all of that initially. Why wait? Why not just go to the house and get him out of bed? We know he was there.
Yeah.
Well, that's always it's mind-boggling how that was what happened. I mean, you just call off the chase, and then just ignore it.
Right. It's not like you're dealing with unknown entities. He knew it. I mean, he followed his pattern to a T. The only thing is something happened to Molly and Colt. But as far as the chase and the location and, his habit of driving into the woods basically and leaving the cars there, he followed it to a T. So, and they knew who it was. They had an ID.
Yeah.
Before right. They knew who it was. So I just have never understood how that just didn't blow up completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
For him, but it didn't.
Well,
so.
And he even waited. It took him till they went missing on the 8th. I think it was until the 16th of July before he went and questioned Con and then put out a formal statement, which was like a 1-pager on a piece of his letterhead. It wasn't even like an official report.
Right.
Yeah. So it just makes you think that, there's more going on than meets the eye, and that there's much more backstory that they're not telling us and that they're covering up. And that's why we've been talking about this.
Right. I mean, there was just so much there, and it was right there. I mean, it wasn't, you knew the vicinity it was in, and you knew who knew exactly where it was.
But it goes back to this thing of, well, they were druggies, they ran off, they'll be back. He's put out this rumor that they were in Texas, Wichita Falls, and even the media. Yeah. I mean, he even told the news reporters that this was what had happened. So no one was reporting that there was a missing teenage girl. They were saying she was a runaway from the get-go. And that's the major problem. And that's the biggest problem with these missing persons cases. Because if you do not take action within those first 24 hours, it's going to be hard to find them. And if it's a young girl that's doing drugs or is working as a prostitute or is not like the mainstream young girl, she's not going to be getting the media attention that she should be getting. And that's really the issue here.
Right. And you're right on all of that. There is nothing that Joe Russell could say to me today that would explain to me his actions. Nothing. He could say nothing to me that would convince me that he knew exactly what was going on. Maybe not with Colt and Molly, but he could have interrupted that whole pattern of events by simply going to the house and getting him up and making him take him to the car. I mean,
yeah.
I
have a question for you. I mean, in your experience, all the cases that you worked, have you ever seen, did you ever experience the level of disinformation that this kind of case had from the beginning?
I can honestly tell you no. And I've worked thousands of cases, hundreds of death investigations. And no. I mean, I've worked cases where politicians' children were involved. And of course, you get, there was a little bit more cover up, or not cover up, but silence than in a normal case, but never anything like this. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, because like you said, all they had to do was go, right? Even if they stopped the chase, they knew where Con was going. All they had to do is, even if they went like a couple hours later, but they didn't even do that. They called it off, and I can understand calling it off for safety reasons, but you knew where the guy was going. You knew who he was. They ID'd him on the 911 call.
Right.
So they know where he lives. They know Joe's related to him. It's just so unfathomable that the fact that they just don't go roll up on him. I remember when John Denny? Mm-hmm. He went to, on one of the chases, he actually went to the house and ran up into the house and grabbed Con and pulled him out. And then he got in trouble for that.
Yeah. If there was no people involved, once you get to your house, it is truly supposed to be your castle unless there's imminent danger to someone. And you just have to back off and get a search warrant at that point. But in this particular case, it was more than a police officer and an unknown person or a stranger. I mean, he had dealt with him many times over the exact same thing other than the missing persons part of it. Yeah. He had recovered at least 6 cars, I think, out of that property that had been taken on joyrides.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was, and at the point when you know that there's more people involved, and when you find out that they're missing, I mean, that takes it to a whole nother realm. So I don't understand it. And like I said, I can't imagine anything he could tell me today, not that he gives the rats, about explaining himself to anybody. And I know, I don't believe that he had any involvement in what happened, but other than just silence and ignorance.
Just turning a
it's
blind
just
eye.
so sad. Yeah, it's just so sad.
Well, I want to shift the conversation over a little bit because you got a chance to catch up on some of the podcasts and hear some of the things that has been happening recently, and hopefully some of the new. You listen to Paula's podcasts and you heard Stormy, and so would love to get your feedback and what you're after having some distance from this and hearing this stuff again. Is anything kind of kicked up in your brain as far as what's going on?
Well, yeah. I mean, the interest in Jason Dillard brings back memories. Do you remember that one video of the burglary, basically at the oil rig?
Yes.
Well, that I had someone tell me that was Jason. I couldn't really match it up to anything at the time because the film, the camera angles and the lighting and all that, it just wasn't conducive to a good photo. But yeah, I knew that there was some, or at least, I knew the name and remembered his potential involvement, but it was never confirmed. So, and of course Stormy's name was familiar to me.
Yeah, what'd you think about what she was saying? She was not holding back. She really kind of opened up the door to a lot of things that we didn't really know about, especially the fact that, she was told by Colt to get out of town. And she pretty much believes that if she didn't get out of town, she probably would have been in that car with Colt instead of Molly.
Right. I was confused about the position about if it was supposed to be her, because I think unless it was a hit and they knew this was going to happen, which I'm not convinced that was the case, but I think it probably would have been Stormy instead of Molly.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Colt told her to get out of town. I'm not understanding all of that other than the fact of Jason hanging around and he was going to take care of that. So I assume that meant he was going to make contact with Jason somehow. But
well, based on Stormy's account, I think Colt was aware of how he had treated Stormy in the past. And the stuff that happened, and and plus the fact that he was dealing with him as well, so he knew what kind of character he was. So it was it was good that she heeded his warning.
Yes, it was. I felt really, really bad for her because you could tell she did love him. She was. I think she was in love with him, which is always hard, But, I always go back to I can't remember her name. I should have looked it up. Remember the girl that she did a statement where she had been kidnapped?
Yeah. I don't think we released her name.
Okay.
But I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the one that was kidnapped, and then she was questioned first by the private investigator that Paula hired, and then she was later questioned by other law enforcement, and the fact that and then I believed that the local law enforcement, at least Joe, said something that it was basically a cover. It was a total story to cover up the fact that she was cheating on her husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she actually turned over some physical property that she was told belonged to Molly. I would love to run that by Stormy, or have somebody run that by Stormy and see if she had any knowledge of that.
Wasn't it a ring? Wasn't it a ring?
It was a ring. It was a ring. Yeah.
And I believe you scoured through all the Facebook photos and you actually found a picture of Molly wearing a ring.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's a Facebook picture, and when I blew it up, it just blurred it out. But she didn't wear a lot of jewelry on her hands. There were very few pictures of any jewelry on her hands, but this one had the colors that ring has, but it blurred together, so I could never get a clear enough picture. But I've always wanted the lab to do touch DNA on that, because they have Molly's DNA. They've got the capability to run touch DNA. I don't know if they ever did, because of course we never heard the results of any of their tests.
Yeah, I can't even remember if they even have that. If they even have that ring still.
But it was turned over to them.
I can't remember who it was turned over.
OSI. Is that it?
OSBI.
OSBI. Yeah. I have the receipt, or a copy of the receipt. They had the ring. I don't know where it is now.
Yeah.
But I wonder if Stormy knows her and what she thinks about her veracity, because I don't know if you remember, but we had your polygraph expert listen to her statement too. She was very convincing, and she seemed very credible.
Yeah, and she seemed scared.
Mm-hmm. She did seem very scared.
Yes. But she was so specific, and it wasn't stuff that was, it wasn't stuff that was commonly known. And she brought in people and places that had really not been discussed. And I don't know. I just have always kind of wondered about that, about that connection. I can't quite get her out of my head.
We'll have to ask Stormy.
But yeah, to see if maybe she's, heard about it
well, Stormy, she did mention some of those people that were in that woman's orbit during that time when she was kidnapped. Mm-hmm. So, and she knows those people. I don't know if she knows that particular woman, because she didn't really know Molly that well. I don't even know. Yes. I don't think she even.
I don't even know if she met her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that she just knew her in passing. She didn't know her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It sounded like she knew her to see her.
Yeah.
Because she said she was in the truck, the white truck.
Exactly.
Yeah, she knew her in passing, but they weren't friends. And Colt had really just met Molly. It was very fast. Like he barely knew her.
Right. Yeah. How tragic. Oh my gosh.
And they're 2 days apart, their birthday, which I think is crazy.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's incredible. But yeah, I just. And, when she was mentioning that white truck, I don't know if you remember, but I looked at all the other cars that Con had taken for joyrides and wrecked and were found. And one of them, I think it was right after that, was a white truck out of Wilson, I think. I think they got it. I just have to go back and look.
Yeah.
Because I might get it mixed up with one of the other ones. But, chances are it's not the same person. Chances are it's not the same truck. But when she said that, that's what I thought of immediately is, I wonder if it was the same white truck he took for a joyride, a month later or whatever it was.
Well, we do know Molly's ex-boyfriend, was his name Tanner. Mm-hmm. He did have a white truck like that. So
that was the case. Mm-hmm. Molly was involved in that. She was a witness, basically.
Mm-hmm. When he stole that truck.
Right. They sold the truck from
Do you recall?
Tanner's.
They stole from Tanner's
sister,
someone in the family.
Relative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I recall what, Cindy?
When you were looking at the phone records, you did such a deep dive into all of that stuff. Was there anything that traced back to Jesse, Colt's brother?
No, nothing. Jesse didn't show up on anything. And I remember that because I thought it was rather strange. If I remember correctly, there weren't any calls going out to him, and there weren't any calls that traced back to him coming in.
Well, he didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
So that would make sense.
Right. Yeah. But I didn't see anything that would have. Now, there were some numbers that we couldn't get any ID on, but there were very few.
Yeah.
I guess it's
you tracked down quite a few of those numbers.
Yeah. I mean, it was probably, I don't want to say half a dozen maybe left that we couldn't really track down. I could be off, it's been a long time, but there were very few numbers, but no, nothing came back to Jesse. And Jesse he wasn't on the radar anywhere back then.
No, he wasn't.
I was shocked, at when all that came out, and trying to say that he did. It was like, it doesn't make sense to me. Why would he do that?
Yeah, I know.
He wasn't involved. He wasn't there. He wasn't part of that group.
Well, he knew all those players. I mean, he knew Rob Branch. He knew Jason Dillard. I mean, he was in the car with his truck with Jason Dillard when he got pulled over. And then Jason Dillard jumped out of the truck and left him and another woman in the car. And they ended up getting arrested and Jason didn't. So he knew all the players.
Yeah.
And, because it was
never showed up.
No, he did not.
When we were talking about the trailer, by the property and the people there and the people at the party, out at Horseshoe or whatever, he was never amongst any of those names that came up. So I was pretty shocked at it.
Yeah.
And then when I heard what Jackie was saying, the reason for it and all of this, and I'm thinking, that just doesn't make sense to me. It's just, I guess stranger things have happened, but I was surprised that they were looking at Jesse for that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't see it.
Yeah, we didn't see it either. If Colt was telling Stormy to get out of town, and there was this history with him and Jason Dillard, they were dealing together. I mean, they were, that was known. Do you think that maybe Colt had potentially taken something from Jason and he was afraid of retaliation? Or if there was some kind of motive for him to tell Stormy, you better get out of town because something's about to go down?
I mean, that's always possible with drug dealers, and especially if there's some competition between them. I don't know. I mean, it was the 4th of July weekend. It's just, I don't know. I even looking at the phone records, there was a lot of phone traffic before that chase started. There was a lot of phone traffic going back and forth. So I'm pretty sure there were deals being made and being arranged.
And then there was also a lot of phone traffic after, wasn't there?
Yeah. You mean right after?
Well, yeah, like the day after, like, that kind of thing. And then actually right after, too, that night and through the night, there seemed to be a lot of phone traffic. I remember you telling me and showing us that there was
there was traffic. The most significant traffic, I think, was in the morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning. 5, 6 o'clock in the morning when I know exactly what they were doing. They were moving the car. I'm convinced they were moving the car at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I both agree that we don't believe that car was sitting there for 2 weeks when Paula finally found it.
No, they moved that car.
Yeah.
They moved that car there. And I'll tell you why I know that is because what was her name? The one that owned the car. His girlfriend. Sabrina called. There was a flurry of phone traffic between what's her name? She lived with Colby. Jennifer. Between Jennifer and Con and Sabrina, but not Sabrina and Con. Jennifer and Sabrina. And then when there's that one person that I think was the one actually moving the car, was the one that was going out there to physically move the car. When that was set up, or when that occurred, within 10 minutes, Sabrina called and reported the car stolen. So, I'm sorry, it was after all that flurry, after the very last phone call, it was within 10 minutes that Sabrina called and reported the car stolen. And I believe 100% that they waited until the car was safely moved, and then told her to report it stolen. Because if she would have reported it stolen before then, they would know exactly who it was. They would know exactly it was Con because of everything else. They had him, they knew it was him that night before. But at the point she reported that car stolen, it was within 10 minutes of that flurry of activity on the phone.
And we know that the car wasn't stolen, that he just took it from her. He didn't steal it.
Right.
She knew where it was, and she was charged with insurance fraud.
Right.
Right.
And why would she call it in stolen? Like, why?
I'm sure he told her to, because that's what he did with the other guys that he took their cars. He told them to report them stolen. He told them that. That was his pattern.
Yeah. And then he was planning on possibly splitting the insurance money with her. Who knows?
Maybe.
I mean, because I know that was part of their plan a lot of times.
Yeah.
That's the scam.
Right. So I just 100% know that they would not have reported that car stolen until it was moved off of Con's land or close to him, out that area. But you can't prove it now. I mean, there's no way to prove it, but that's, I'm of all of those phone records, that's the group I am 100% sure of.
Yeah. In your experience, when you have all this type of, I would say, circumstantial evidence, how does, as an investigator, how difficult is it? I mean, because it's not just finding out who did it. You got to find the evidence to kind of convict them. Can you give us a perspective where, in your many cases that you've covered, where you've had a similar situation where you knew exactly who did it, or had maybe a 75-80% probability of who did it, and you had a lot of circumstantial evidence, but you didn't have that smoking gun? What's that like from an investigator's mind to try to deal with that?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that the term circumstantial evidence gets a raw deal, because most cases are actually made 100% out of circumstantial evidence. It's just that you have to connect the dots between them. Direct evidence is not very common. I mean, direct evidence is pretty much if you're standing there and you see it happen. But so many things are circumstantial evidence. Fingerprints are not because it's a positive ID, like DNA, but they're not direct evidence. So technically, even DNA and blood work and ballistics and fingerprints, even they are considered circumstantial evidence. It's just that they have a higher weight because they can be used for positive identification when you don't have a set of eyes to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Example, like someone could have been there prior to a murder and cut their hand and there was a little tiny piece of blood there and had nothing to do with the murder, but it's collected and it IDs them. It's circumstantial evidence, but is it rock solid? Is it prove that they did it?
No, absolutely not. It proves that they were there at some point in time and bled. That's what it proves. But so you have to connect the dots, and it's not easy, but people, when they hear the term circumstantial evidence, they seem to think a lot of times, oh, it doesn't matter. It definitely matters. It's just that you need to be able to build a foundation and connect those dots. So, for example, if you recover, let me see if I can give you a quick example. Say there's a murder in the neighborhood and you have vehicle description, and that's all you have. So you're patrolling, you see a vehicle that matches it, you follow the vehicle until you can get a reason to stop it, because it looks like a vehicle reported, but unless you can match the plate number or something like that, you still have to have a reason to stop it. So you stop the vehicle, say the murder was a shooting. So you stop the vehicle, the person lets you search the car, you find a gun in the car. You still have to put that, it's all circumstantial, but that gun has to be tested for ballistics. The ballistics have to match the bullet from the body. Then you have to match the gun to the person and the car. That's all circumstantial evidence. So you just tie it together one string at a time.
So you could have the smoking gun and still not be proof enough that he did it.
Right. You still can't prove that person used that gun on that victim at that time. You still have to do that. You have to build the case level by level by level. And as an investigator, has that ever happened to me? Many times. Many times. And I've even had some cases where I knew the guy did it. I could not prove it. And I had to just sit back, because most of the time, those people will reoffend. Most criminals don't just do it once. Those are usually crimes of passion, just a stupid mistake that some people actually learn from and don't do it again. Most criminals have done it many more times than they've ever been caught or convicted. So I just sat back and I waited, and sure enough, he did it again. And I got him that time.
And kind of what happened. I mean, he did it again with High Speed Chase, and that's how they got him.
Well, not only him. I mean, you had Colt. He was in federal prison for gun charges and meth, and then Jason Dillard, the same thing.
Yeah, he's in prison. That's what I wanted to ask you about, him being a CI. What do you think about that?
It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
What is that? What kind of role does that play? Like, when you're a CI, what does that mean for people that don't know?
Well, a CI is a confidential informant. So they're basically working undercover for law enforcement as a criminal. I mean, there are rules around CIs. So, he can't be involved in if you're a CI, you can't go out and get a bunch of guys and plan a robbery and then report that to the police and then have them, that's entrapment. So there are rules for CIs that they can and cannot do, but basically that's what a CI is. Sometimes it's just they hear stuff. Sometimes they're not actually doing the stuff, but they're in the world, or the group, and they know when something's going to happen, and they can report that, and then it might be a sting, it might just be a raid, who knows? But they're just reporting what's going on in their world to law enforcement. And generally CIs are CIs because they've been in trouble and they get a break. on their sentence.
Well, that's the thing. If he's a CI,
If they
let's
turn
say
somebody.
let's say he was involved, hypothetically, and he knew Khan was involved, wouldn't he just roll over on Khan?
Well, that certainly could happen, and it could still happen today. But I guess it depends on his level of activity with it. I mean, they don't get passes usually, complete passes. He may not, it depends on the charge, but he could get a lighter sentence, something like that for that. But yeah, it's always possible to do that, to inform and for the break. People do it all the time. That's how you build drug cases most of the time. That's how you build a drug case from the lowest level, is to as high as you can go. You flip people constantly. You flip at each level to go to the next level.
And then what is your experience in other police departments? Do the police department or law enforcement agency kind of have their own kind of guidelines for CI? I can't imagine that Love County or Carter County has the same level of guidelines as the Illinois State Police for CIs.
There may be differences in their standard operating procedures in the department. There could be, but bottom line is you have to meet the judicial system standards as well. So like I said, an easy example of that is you can't plan the event and then trick everybody to show up, and then you have the police swoop in and arrest them and you're scot-free. So that's entrapment. That would be thrown out of court. So you can't do things like that. You can't, as a CI, you're not supposed to participate. You might have to go along, for a while, but you're not supposed to really participate. Like if you know a murder's going to happen and you participate in it and then think you're going to flip, that's going to save you. No. Maybe you'll get a lighter sentence if you inform, but so there are rules around CIs.
Yeah.
And there's standard rules based on the court. I have here's a good example. One of my largest cases was a prison riot at a men's maximum security state penitentiary in Illinois. And it was a violent riot. There were over 1,000 of the worst involved. And they brutally murdered 3 guards. And they brutally tried to murder 3 other guards. And they set the prison on fire. I had 12 arson scenes, 3 murders and 3 attempted murders, and 1,000 people with weapons before it was shut down.
Wow.
So it was rough. Because of the nature of that case, we're talking about prisoners inside of a cell block murdering guards, and they swarmed them. And so when it came time for trial, we had arrested, I think initially we arrested 10 of them. And I think, oh God, it's been so long ago. Some didn't go, 10 of them went to trial at the same time in the same courtroom. So when we were testifying in there, we were testifying to 2 juries, the one jury, and then they had a second jury as a backup that was listening in on everything because of the people, so many people. We had 10 defendants, and each one of those defendants had their attorneys. It was like, I've never been involved in anything like that. When somebody would object, 10 people would object, so wow. It was kind of like a circus. But in any event, because of all the cross-contamination of all of the weapons, it was very difficult to get any type of good evidence. Plus, what happened is when they spilled into the yard and then the riot that's where they contained them. All of the weapons that they had, most were shanks. They stuck them down into the ground. They threw them in the bushes. And then to get things cleaned up as fast as possible and get them under control so that they could strip them down and search them and get them back into their cells, the state police actually, they just started throwing everything together in big boxes. So there was all this cross-contamination of physical evidence. So because we couldn't then positive identification off of physical evidence, we had to use witnesses and eyewitnesses, and a lot of those were inmates that saw what was going on. Some of them were involved at different levels, but because of that, we lost every murder case because of the credibility issue.
Yep.
So that's kind of what happens.
Yeah. Because that's, I think in the BIA's investigation, I mean, they've been on it now for almost a year and a half now.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they're investigating it. We know. And
right.
but it's like the biggest thing that main investigator was quoted as saying in one of his local papers that we know what happened, now we just have to prove it. And
that's right.
So
that's a big we just have to prove it. That's a huge jump from thinking it and knowing it to proving it is a huge jump. And a lot of people don't understand that because, quite frankly, most people, their only real knowledge of it is what they see on TV. And it's never real. It's never real. It's tough to prove a case. It's very tough to prove in criminal court because you have to have, and it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt, like everybody says. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. So what that means is that would a reasonable person, knowing this to be the truth, would they convict? Would they think the person was guilty? That's the bar that you have to meet. Where in civil cases, you just have to meet a preponderance of the evidence, which is like 51%. It just has to be there's just a little bit more than not. So, you have a lesser bar to reach. But criminal, to find somebody guilty of criminal is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be because you're taking somebody's freedom away and in some cases their lives.
Do you think from a legal perspective that Molly's family has enough to file a civil case against some of these people?
I think they did. I think the statute of limitation is probably gone on that. Most states have a 2-year, at least from the time that they're declared dead, would have a 2-year window. And some are longer, most are at least 2 years, but there's usually a time limit for that.
Well, Molly was only declared dead, I believe, in 2020.
Well, it certainly is something I would check out if they can find a decent attorney there.
Yeah.
That they could trust and find out if they've got something. You can, a wrongful death. That's what O.J. Simpson. That's what he got. He was, of course, he was found innocent of the criminal charges, but the families got him on unlawful death or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, but that was kind of like a moot point because they found him guilty of wrongful death in the civil case, but he didn't end up paying them a dime.
Yeah. Well, and that's
even after he died, his lawyer even said, he goes, the family's not going to get any of his whatever money he has left. And I guess, which I thought was really interesting. Then he came back and backtracked it, but it's a tough road.
It is a tough road, and sometimes if there's insurance involved, then you've got a little bit better shot at it than if you're going after him personally. And of course, in civil case, it's always monetary. You're never going to get a jail sentence out of that. It's always a monetary fine.
Was there anything else that you heard in either one, even in Paula's recent one, that kind of jarred your memory or brought you back and had your wheels starting to turn again?
Well, yeah, a lot of it. I mean, it all sounded so familiar so quickly. I still think in my heart it's solvable. Every day that goes by, it gets a little more remote. I don't think from a physical evidence standpoint, it's going to be very difficult. But you remember what Stormy kept saying about Khan's motto was no body, no crime?
Yep.
Wrong. There's many cases where they've convicted people of murder with no body.
I believe.
It's not easy. It is not easy, but it can be done.
I believe that can happen.
Yeah. So because there may not be any bodies left does not mean that they're home free. Because again, circumstantial evidence can be piled on top of itself until you've got a complete picture. And that's just as good as any direct evidence. in any court. Like I said, most cases are won on circumstantial evidence only.
Well, that's hopeful.
So,
That's
yeah, I mean, he is sadly mistaken about that. You can definitely be convicted of murder without a body.
Well,
Maybe there's hope. Who
yeah.
knows?
Well, you got to have hope.
And quite frankly, anybody who may have been involved from the lowest to the highest is going to get the same charges. So, you know, if people are out there listening and they've got some involvement in it, save yourself, man. You know?
Well, yeah, because isn't it the first person that talks, they get the deal?
They get the deal. They get the deal. And if you're in that group and you're not that person, you're going to go down just like they are. I don't care if you're the lookout or if you're a driver or if you're one of the people who moved the car. You're in it. You're in it for the long run. You're in it for the murder charge. Potentially.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there had to be multiple people involved in this. It wasn't just one person.
Right. And even if it's a cover-up, even if it was just you had some involvement in a cover-up, you weren't there when it happened, you didn't do it, but you covered it up, you're just as culpable. You're going to be charged. So, you know, those people might want to think about doing the right thing for themselves and for everybody else.
Well, get ahead of it.
Right.
Before it comes rolling down your way. Because it will. The truth always comes out. We know this in all the cases and all the things, even with wrongful convictions that we've worked on, whatever, the truth will always come out at some point. So you're better off getting ahead of it before it comes and barrels you down. Right.
And I can't imagine. I mean, one of the things when you arrest people, and we arrest good people. I mean, they're not, you know, good people make mistakes. And the one thing that is universal with all of them, when I would interview them and they would finally confess to me, they all had an instant release of pressure. Every one of them just felt that you could physically see them release the pressure on their body. You know, they carry a terrible weight around with them.
Especially since there's more than one person and they don't know if the other person's going to flip on them. They know the other people know the same information. You got to live with that hanging over your head. How do you live with like that?
I know. I don't know. I don't know how they do, especially people that have gone on and have changed their lives maybe or bettered their lives. Maybe now they have a family, you know, they have children of their own. How do you live with that? I don't know.
Well, I think your words of recommendation of like, if you know something and if you were involved in it, to get ahead of it, and because you'll get the deal, but if you don't, you won't.
You won't. And I think that it's with the right people right now that they can trust what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. You
have to be able to trust who you're talking to. And I think, you know, that it's probably with the right people now to get it.
The law enforcement. Yeah. You can trust the law enforcement that's taken over the case now and that they'll do the right thing.
Right. So, you know, I think that's what it's, unfortunately, I think it's what it's going to take. It's going to take somebody to come forward, even with a little piece of information that can be validated and followed up on. Because generally when you get that, the pieces fall. They fall as they go. And, you know, it just takes that one person to stand up and give that one little piece of the puzzle and unfortunately, they're going to have to testify to it or they're going to have to sign an affidavit to it. You know, sometimes you can do anonymous, but in something like this, I'm not going to lie. I don't know what an anonymous tip right now is, just like every other tip. You know, it's hard to validate them.
Yeah. Well, the good news is
going to take some.
The good news is that we have been getting more tips, and
good,
which is good. And they're not like crazy they're not anonymous tips. And we have heard that people that were involved in that orbit of people, some of them are not long for this world and have been talking to get it like you said,
Great.
off their chest and make it right with God. So, to
Great.
me, it's like, hopefully some of that will filter through and people know that they're talking, and you want to get ahead of it. You better get ahead of it soon. And hopefully that's what it's going to take.
I hope so. And I can personally attest to the fact that I have seen it happen time and time again, even for people that were facing some pretty serious consequences when they released when they got the final story out and it was the truth. You could physically see them release the stress. It's an incredible thing to witness.
And that stress causes cancer, it causes diseases. I mean, it's something to live with that's horrible. I can't imagine how you live with that stress.
I don't either. And I'll tell you what, it also, I don't care what anybody else says, it also causes karma. And I've seen that happen too. It's just a bad thing to carry around with you, something like that.
Yeah.
So I hope somebody comes forward, because unfortunately I kind of think that's what it's going to take now.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm hoping as well that's what's going to happen. And like I said, every time we do another podcast, it kind of shakes the trees a little bit more. We didn't do it for a while. We did it for like 6-7 months. We didn't go. And people were still listening to this podcast. And we were still getting tips even during that. We just wanted to wait. And then when the whole Jesse thing came out, and then we reached, because we were like, we got to just stop this. We got to figure this out. If he did it, we're going to, because Cindy had interviewed him for the television show, and we're like, let's reach out. Let's see if he'll talk to us. We did while he's in prison now. And we talked to him, and then you heard his thing. I mean, it was very clear, and we're like, okay. And like I said, and Paula says this too, we don't know who did it, but the likelihood of Jesse doing it, based upon all we know and everybody who's looked into this case, law enforcement, and we've asked law enforcement too, a lot of them. And then he didn't even show up then in the early stages. The people that showed up in the early stages are the same people we're talking about right now.
Right. And those were the people involved. Those were the people involved that night. Those were the people involved the next morning. And those were the people involved that weekend. And that's where it's at.
And those are the people that showed up on those phone records.
Yes. And that it's in there. It's in there. Those are the people. It's not, it's not some cartel from Mexico. It's not a neighboring gang or something. I mean, it's not a psychopath. It's in that group of people.
Well, fantastic. Jody.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to us on Molly's birthday. And God rest her soul.
Yeah.
Yes.
And,
hopefully.
Yeah. And
we'll get her home still.
Yeah. Well, we'll check in with you sometime soon, and we hope you're doing well. If you have any information regarding the case, please contact the BIA at www.bia.gov/BIA/missing-murder-unit.
You can also call their hotline with tips at 1-833-560-2065 and email them directly at ojs_mmu@bia.gov.
And if you want to text them with a tip, text keyword BIA-MMU and send your tip to 847-411.
Check the Partners in True Crime website for this and any additional information.
If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.